Yay, we're live. All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to Sports Talk with Austin, your daily dose of entertainment. And tonight on the show, I welcome special guest Jackson Johnson. How are you today, man?
I am doing very awesome, Austin. How are you, my good man?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm glad you decided to join me tonight as we discuss all things Alabama for the 2023 football season. Now, going into the 2023 football season, Alabama has a lot of questions that they normally don't have, including one: who's going to be the quarterback? Is it going to be Jalen Milroe or Tyler Buchner? It's not one of those rare situations where Nick Saban's got to make a choice.
I'll be honest.
What are your thoughts, Jackson?
I'll be honest. This one's a toughie because Milroe was a disaster in the spring game. And, Buchner, I'm thinking that he could be the starting quarterback, but at the same time, it's kind of a we'll see situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to point out too, everyone remembers that Texas A&M game from last year. Milroe couldn't hold on to the ball to save his life. He threw a pick, I believe. He fumbled a couple times. It was a disaster. If it hadn't have been for Alabama's defense, they may have not won that game.
I mean, imagine if Texas A&M had Match Johnson in that game as quarterback or Connor Wigman. We'd have lost for sure.
Mm-hmm. Now, I would like to ask you, Jackson, looking at this quarterback battle, what do you think are some of the traits that Milroe has that Buchner doesn't? And what are some traits that Buchner has that Milroe doesn't that could set them apart in Nick Saban's eyes?
Well, I think Milroe's a little bit faster compared to Buchner. But like Buchner, he's a pretty good thrower, so there's that. But I'm just kind of like, I'm just like, we should have just gone for the transfer portal for the quarterback situation. Like, we should have just gotten to see if Coastal Carolina's guy was going to leave Coastal Carolina since Chadwell left.
Mm-hmm. Now, a question that ties into this, Jackson, that I'm also curious about, especially from your perspective as Alabama. Do you think Buchner would be a better choice considering Tommy Rees is your new OC as compared to Milroe, who's learning a whole new system if he is the QB1 opening day? Your thoughts on that?
I think Buchner would make a better quarterback than Milroe at the moment, but when it gets to after week 1 or week 2, then I think we'll know for sure.
Mm-hmm. In your personal opinion, do you think if Buchner would have stayed at Notre Dame, do you think he would have? I know it's too early to tell because he hasn't taken a snap in the regular season as the Bama quarterback. But what are some of the flashes that you like about Buchner at Notre Dame that he could bring to Alabama that could compare to Alabama?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of things I like about Buchner, but there's some things I'm not too crazy about at the moment, but I'm kind of just on wait-and-see mode with everything at QB. And when Tommy Rees got hired by Alabama, I remember that the Notre Dame fan base was happy to see him go, so that made me reasonably nervous. So I was thinking,
yes,
man.
That's very interesting. To elaborate on that, is it concerning when a team, especially speaking from my perspective and your perspective, is it concerning when a team just gets rid of their OC and they're all happy about it, and then you end up with that OC? That brings a lot of concern because you're like, why are you throwing a party? You should be disappointed because he was a good OC and now he's coming to Bama. Is that concerning to you, Jackson? That maybe that he's going to show traits of Bill O'Brien, possibly? That
it does a little bit, but again, I think by the time it's the end of September, we'll know more for sure.
Mm-hmm. And now another key thing about Alabama this season is they got a lot of tough games on the schedule. Alabama's got a loaded schedule, more than normally, because I know other than they go at South Florida and then they play Chattanooga, which if it was up to me, Jackson, I don't know about you, good buddy, but I would have Alabama playing at least some tougher opponents. Wouldn't you agree?
I agree, definitely. Because, I mean, like last season, I didn't even watch Alabama Austin Peay because it was like, that game's boring. I don't want to watch the cupcake games, even if my own team's in it. I'm not watching that dung heap.
Well, now we're at the point now where Alabama going forward, with all this realignment talking and stuff, their schedule's going to get a lot harder.
Right.
Harder. So, how do you feel the conference realignment is going to help or hurt Alabama moving forward in the SEC? How do you feel that's going to affect them?
I don't think it's going to hurt Alabama. I think it helps them in a way. It helps the strength of schedule. And, we already have a tougher non-conference schedule in the future, so to speak. Like one year we got Wisconsin and Florida State for the 2025 season. That's going to be really good. And I'm really happy to see Alabama-Oklahoma becoming a conference game in the future, and Alabama-Texas as well. But the only thing I'm concerned about is I know that Alabama-Auburn is going to stay on as an annual game. My concern is what's going to happen to the third Saturday in October. I don't know that being affected whatsoever, because that is a great rivalry. Because, I mean, like before last year, I remember there were grumblings about Alabama-Tennessee. It's like, oh, that's just another Alabama win. No, the Alabama-Tennessee game is a top-notch rivalry. It was like when it was like Oregon-Washington in the Northwest, where people were talking about how Oregon-Washington's not a rivalry because Oregon's dominating Washington, but then 2016 happened, Washington ends the losing streak, and then people are like, oh, I see Oregon-Washington as a rivalry. Whereas with last year, Hendon Hooker pulled off that upset. Hendon Hooker and the Tennessee Vols pulled off that upset, and everybody was like, I see this Alabama-Tennessee game as a rivalry after all. No doy, there's a lot of history in that rivalry.
Now, my personal take on this, I feel like this is healthy for the Georgias and Alabamas of the world because now that Texas and Oklahoma are joining, it gives you your schedule, like you mentioned, Jackson. It gives it more fluidity. It gives it more of when the committee looks at it, they can say, oh, Alabama went to Oklahoma, they won that game. Oh, and they went to Texas, and then on a given year they throw Georgia in there, and they happen to win all three, then that schedule's looking really nice. And plus you add on the fact of LSU could possibly be on there. Let's hope Tennessee sticks around. And then you got Auburn. If they can get back on track, Alabama could have a really good schedule that would be undeniable for the playoffs, that people would not be complaining as much in years past. Would you agree with that sentiment, Jackson?
Oh, I agree wholeheartedly. I agree. And especially with Auburn, because, I mean, they're going to get back on track, and they could be trouble for Alabama this year. Like, I would not be surprised if they put a scare into the Crimson Tide.
Now, the interesting thing I'd like to point out, does this hurt does it hurt Alabama in this way, Jackson? Alabama no longer has any games that they can look at and say is a win. does it hurt the confidence of the players and the coaching staffs because they always look forward to we've got a quote unquote bye week, and now all of a sudden Oklahoma's in that slot now. Now there's no rest for the weary. And I understand that argument is that's the way it's supposed to be. But you also have to understand it's also taking away from the fact of these smaller schools getting money from these bigger schools, and it helps them out. Yes, they do get the national TV exposure and they get all the media attention, and then they end up getting beat down by 20-plus points. That's not the fun part. But we have to look at it also from the part of it's taking away money from the other schools, the smaller schools. In that sense, does it hurt Alabama because they don't get to play the Austin Peays and the Chattanoogas of the world as often as they would like to help those schools out?
I don't think it's going to hurt the Alabama Crimson Tide. I think it helps them. It helps the fans, it helps the players, and it helps the coaches. It helps everybody.
That's fair because looking at it, when you have these competitive games and these intense games, like in this year's schedule, which we're going to get to and talk about, is your players are going to be less rested, and there's no longer, other than your allotted 1 or 2 bye weeks, just like in the NFL, there's no rest for the weary, so to speak. Now, as the Chattanoogas and the South Floridas of the world on the Bama schedule, let's say, for instance, knock on wood, none of this happens, but let's say Jalen Milroe's your quarterback and he gets hurt. Well, now he has a week off, and Buchner could come in and just hold the fort down until he gets back, and then he could be ready for whoever's next after that. In that sense, it hurts them in that sense. But as far as us fans, we get to see a wonderful treat. We get to see Alabama play Texas, Oklahoma. Hopefully they play Georgia some more. Hopefully Tennessee stays around. Hopefully Auburn stays around. Hopefully all this stays around, because we're getting to the point now, Jackson. I don't know if you agree or not, or look at it any different, but we're heading for 2 super conferences. And I've heard some people say that could be good for the sport, and it's also bad for the sport. What's your take on it?
It feels like we're heading towards that monopoly, if you will. Because, I mean, like last season with the playoffs, they realized, we can't make it obvious. But I know there was CBS Sports. They were predicting that Michigan, Georgia, Alabama, and Ohio State are going to make it to the playoffs. Not so sure that my Crimson Tide are going to make it, but I could most definitely see Georgia likely winning the SEC and Michigan, Ohio State getting back into the playoffs. But I could just tell you right now, we're heading towards that. I mean, Big Ten's getting closer to 20 teams, and SEC, they're going to get closer to 20. They're going to pick apart the ACC. I'm sorry to say, ACC fans.
Yeah, we're heading towards that, and that's the interesting thing. It's like, is it healthy for the sport? Because it's already at the point where Georgia, the Michigans, the Ohio States, Alabama still to some extent are just dominating, and then you got the other teams like your Louisvilles, your lower tier teams that are kind of like, we have to be stuck in a conference with these guys. Like even like poor Stanford and Cal, like even though they haven't been good in a while, at least in the Pac-12 they can always sneak out a win or two, because the Pac-12 eats themselves alive. But now if you put Cal and Stanford, say, in the SEC with Alabama, Georgia, Texas, Oklahoma, there is going to be no sneaking out, no wins there. It's called, they're going to be on national TV getting ran over by a bread truck. Yeah.
I'm
Go
trying not
ahead.
to laugh at the idea of a Stanford Cal in the SEC, but then it's like, oh yeah, that West Virginia joined the Big 12, Missouri joined the SEC, UCLA joined the Big 10. So I mean, the ACC almost had Stanford Cal join, but Notre Dame wasn't too happy when the ACC was like, yeah, we're not going to have those guys and SMU join. Plus, I don't think NBC likes the idea of it either. Because, I mean, let's be real. NBC would much rather air a Notre Dame Michigan State game than they would a Notre Dame California Notre Dame SMU. Now they may put a happy face on it on the promos like Notre Dame SMU 6:30 p.m. on NBC, but privately they're just kind of like, hey Notre Dame, we don't want to air these games. We're making more money with Notre Dame, Ohio State. We've made millions, hundreds of millions with this game. Notre Dame, SMU, we're only making $1 million. We're barely making $1 million off this game.
I'm glad you brought up Notre Dame.
You're going to see that later in the season. You're going to see the money roll in with Notre Dame, Ohio State. Ratings are going to roll in for Notre Dame, Ohio State. Notre Dame, dude, not so much. NBC is going to see the money, and then they're going to convince Notre Dame. You might want to look at joining the Big 10. We'll pay that buyout for you with the ACC, but let's go join the Big 10 together.
I'm glad you brought up Notre Dame, Jackson. And on the talk of does it help or hurt Alabama? Well, we've got the new 12-team playoff coming up in 2024. And it's kind of interesting because let's say, for instance, in 24, Alabama loses 2 games and win the SEC, but Notre Dame goes unbeaten and they're not in a conference. And with all this conference realignment, they say, oh, Alabama gets that bye because they're in the SEC. They beat Texas, Oklahoma, etc. And Notre Dame, you just beat up on the Dukes and the North Carolinas, which North Carolina's no slouch, but you get where I'm going with that.
Right.
And then Notre Dame's like, that's not fair. They lost 2 games. We went unbeaten. We won our schedule. And it's like it's almost like they're going to make Notre Dame join a conference because someone like an Alabama, no offense to Alabama fans out there, including Jackson, it's just where we're heading in college football. And that's where I think it'll help Alabama because normally, other than they are the brand of college football, a 2-loss Bama more than likely should not get in over a Notre Dame. Should not,
right.
Not in a 14 format. But with all this realignment and the fact that we're extending to 12 now, Bama with 2 losses can win the SEC and get a bye, and Notre Dame's just sitting there like, we went unbeaten. What else do we have to do? And in that sense, it's kind of like it helps Alabama, but it hurts Notre Dame in the long run. But like, what do you think on that, Jackson?
Yeah, that could very well be a reality, but I'll be honest with you. I don't even think we're going to last long at 12 teams. I'm thinking we're heading over to 16, 24 with all this conference realignment with the way things are going.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's interesting, too. And the last point I would like to make on this topic is if Alabama, in years past, Alabama has ran over their competition. Georgia, for the longest time, couldn't beat them. Auburn, a lot of times, was hit and miss. LSU, if other than 2019, have been hit and miss with Bama. Everybody's been hit and miss. But now with this conference realignment, there's a lot of mystery because now Alabama's got more opponents to play, and who knows who else is going to get added. And now, if we expand to 16, like you're saying, Jackson, they could end up playing someone as they could end up playing Ohio State possibly in a 3-6 game. As in years past, if Bama gets the 1, they get the 4, and they play someone like, no offense, a TCU, and they would just run them over. And I think in that sense, it's good because It creates more competition, but it's also bad because it knocks teams out of things and it hurts college football overall.
Oh, it does.
I would like to think there's some good in this, but there seems like there's a lot more bad. But I would like to transition now, Jackson. We're on 2023, and there's some key games this year for Alabama that could decide whether they make the playoffs, make the SEC title game, everything in stake. And let's start off with Week 2 versus Texas. Is Texas back, Jackson? Is this the week Texas gets you all? Well, what's your opinion on this game?
I don't think we're gonna hear that Texas back line, but I do know that I don't know if Chris Fowler or Sean McDonald's gonna call that game, and if we see like a Texas upset, if we'll hear that Texas is back, I'm like, yeah, I don't know about that. They gotta get through everybody else, but
that is interesting. Go ahead.
Yeah, but seriously, with Quinn Ewers, like if he hadn't gotten hurt last year against Bama, I think they would have beaten the Crimson Tide. I mean, we got lucky at Austin last year, and I'll be honest,
there's a lot of questionable calls.
Well, and if you look at last year when some of the Bama players were doing that horns down business, Say was like, "Don't do that! Don't do that!" He was yelling at them, "Don't do that!" And then, I'm wondering if Texas is going to look at that and go, "They did the horns down business in our house. Let's do the rammer jammer at them if we beat them."
Yes, that like everyone remembers the famous Will Greer horns down, and that started a whole thing. But for this game, I personally believe that last year you could say it was a fluke that Bryce Young should have been called for the safety. His shin was down, that the referees bailed him out, that Alabama got away with everything. The fact in the matter is, in the situation, is Bama was just able to make more plays than Texas. Texas and Quentin Ewers played a heck of a game, but he also wasn't as healthy as he probably should have been either. As this year, let's be honest, he should be healthy, hopefully. This is week 2.
Right.
And can Texas win the Big 12? Because there's a lot of expectations on Texas. This game here for Texas is going to define Texas's season. For Alabama, this is another game to them, almost. This isn't right. Of course, they would love to win it. Nick Saban loves winning these games, but this won't define them. Texas, this will define Texas. Would you agree with that, Jackson?
Oh, I agree. I mean, Texas doesn't necessarily need to win this game, but it would help them on a national level. They have to win the Big 12 before they join the SEC, because if they don't, Steve Sarkisian is going to be on a hot seat going into 2024.
And the thing is, Jackson, too, we're in 2023, and Alabama is still that team you look at. People think Georgia's taking the reins of being, they're the standard now. They're the team everyone needs to be. But the fact that Texas fans and me and you are having a conversation of this game on Alabama's schedule, saying this is more important to Texas than it would be to Alabama, because Alabama has beaten great teams in the past. There's a long laundry list of teams Saban has beaten. To them, if they beat Texas, it's another good to great win. But for Texas, this win could go down in history, and that's where people need to realize Alabama, whether they like it or not, is still one of the standards. They may not be the standard, but they are still one of. But we don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater, as you like to say, partner. On that,
That is a good line. My mama gave me that line.
but as far as this game goes, who do you have winning, Jackson?
I got Alabama winning this game for right now, but I think it's going to be a really tight game. Because, I mean, anytime Bama has lost a game, it's because they always go up against a good quarterback. That is usually key in beating the Alabama Crimson Tide.
I will say, your final score prediction for this game.
Ooh, that is a good one. I'm going to have to say 31-27, Alabama.
I will say I've got Bama winning this too, but I've got Bama winning this game 27-17. I think they win by 10. I think Alabama is gonna get an early turnover or two, and plus it's at home. Nick Saban, he's hard to beat at home. I feel like this is a game that they win by double digits, not a big margin, 10 points, as I said. So I feel like Bama's going to create a couple turnovers, make Quentin Ewers uncomfortable, and the fact that they're in Tuscaloosa makes it a little more challenging for Texas. Now we hop into a little SEC play. Week 7 versus Arkansas. This is another key game, I believe, not only for Alabama, but this is also key for Arkansas. What is your take on this game, Jackson?
I'll be honest, in 2007, who'd have thought that game-winning touchdown by John Parker Wilson in 2007 would turn into suddenly a 16-game winning streak over Arkansas? Because that's what it's turned into. And, Arkansas, they got Raheem Rocket Sanders. He was 13th in rushing yards per game last season, and he was second in the SEC in rushing yards per game in the season. Arkansas also was 7th in the nation in rushing yards per game. Let me tell you, they were scary Mary when it comes to the running game. KJ Jefferson, when healthy, he will chew you up like a chicken nugget on defense.
Now, let me ask you this. From an Alabama point of view, Jackson, is this the best team you've seen of Arkansas since you all been playing them?
That's a good question. I mean, those teams that were coached by Bobby Petrino and with quarterback Ryan Mallett, rest in peace, Ryan Mallett. 2010, that was the best Arkansas team. 2021, that was the best game. But 2023, I'm kind of all wait and see because if you look at this game, it's in Tuscaloosa, so it's going to be another Bama route. So, like it or not, this will be a 38-21 victory for the Alabama Crimson Tide.
Yeah, I have to tend to agree with you on that again, Jackson. I feel as if this is Arkansas. They've struggled with Alabama, and there's a lot of hype on them. Is this their best team that they've had? KJ Jefferson in the running back duo. The defense is supposed to be better. Sam Pittman. Is this finally the year they dethrone Alabama? Finally end it? I don't think so. I think since this is in Tuscaloosa, I think KJ Jefferson will keep it close because the fact of Alabama struggles with mobile quarterbacks, as you pointed out, Jackson. And I think he'll keep it close, but I have a feeling Alabama's going to pull away late, and they're going to win this game like 34-20. I think it's another Bama win. Now,
yes, it will.
Now on to the next key game in the schedule, and we all remember this one.
Revenge game.
Yes, Week 8 versus Tennessee. Everyone remembers the classic. Bryce Young, Hendon Hooker going blow for blow. Jackson, are we going to have another shootout classic, or Is Alabama going to kick some butt in this game because they're ticked off Tennessee beat them?
Well, as we mentioned a little while ago, Bama does very well on the revenge games. This here is one of them. But if Joe Milton can bring out some of that same magic that Hendon Hooker brought out, I think Tennessee's going to have a bright future ahead of them in the 2023 season. I mean, Joe Milton was fantastic against Clemson last year in the Orange Bowl. I mean, I'm looking at all the games he's played throughout 2022 when he took over for Hendon Hooker after that injury against South Carolina. Milton has thrown zero, and I repeat, zero interceptions. That's a dangerously accurate quarterback right there. And if we do get beat again by Tennessee for a second straight year, Joe Milton is the reason why.
I will say in this, are you, Jackson, you personally, are you buying some of the Tennessee hype? Because there's a lot of people that are buying the Tennessee hype. They're drinking the Kool-Aid, which I will be honest. I know Josh Heupel, great year last year, fantastic. Hendon Hooker, should have been a Heisman finalist, but wasn't because of his ACL, and he had all the stats to back it up. But now can Tennessee continue that success? Because beating Bama 1 year is fantastic. It sets you up for life. Josh Heupel's liable to get a big contract extension off of it. All seriousness, he probably will. But if he beats Bama twice, they're going to be backing the money truck up to his house saying, here, take our money. Take it. How much you want? You want $600 million for 5 years? Take it. We'll give you more money than Jimbo. We'll give more money than anybody you want because you beat Alabama twice in 2 consecutive years.
If Tennessee does beat Florida and Alabama for the second straight year, it will be the first time since 2003 that Tennessee has beaten Florida in Gainesville and beaten Alabama in Tuscaloosa, which, by the way, in 2003 was a 4 overtime game between Alabama and Tennessee. Tennessee got away scot-free. And it will also be the first time since 03 and 04 that Tennessee has beaten Alabama in consecutive years.
Which brings up an interesting point. Are you buying the Tennessee hype, Jackson? Are you buying it?
Oh, yeah, I got Tennessee going 10-2.
Interesting. Which, by the way, folks, you will see our predictions on the SEC this coming Saturday night. Be sure to tune in live for that. But as for this, who do you have winning this game, Jackson?
Oh, I got Alabama winning this game. This one's going to be a 35-31 victory for the Alabama Crimson Tide.
Now, I may get some pushback on this, but ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Bama's going down again. I got Tennessee winning 32-29. I think Joe Milton and company get it done. Another last-second field goal, and Tennessee 2 years in a row takes Bama down in Tuscaloosa. Nonetheless,
if that happens, it'll be the first time since 2014-2015 that somebody has beaten the Alabama Crimson Tide in consecutive years. That would be the Ole Miss Rebels with Hugh Freeze.
Now, talking about consecutive years, Week 10 versus LSU. Now, I want to preface this. LSU has been the talk of the offseason ever since they beat Alabama last year. You want to talk about revenge on the mind. I honestly think Bama has got this game circled more than Tennessee because everyone's on the LSU hype train. Oh, Brian Kelly is going to take us to a natty. We're ranked top 5 and top 10 in the coaches polls and USA Today, and Joe Klatt believes in us. And everyone's drinking the BK Kool-Aid. But let's not forget, let's not forget. Let's put this in proper perspective. LSU won that game last year. All props to them. But if Mason Taylor hadn't have fallen in on the 2-point conversion, we would have a different conversation right about now. There would not be as much hype as there is now. And that's, I believe, the main thing that's causing all this hype is because, Brian Kelly with 70% of his roster overturned. Look what he did. He beat Alabama in his first year. See Notre Dame, he can thrive in the SEC. Y'all just don't have the talent to thrive outside of good competition. Well, in this game here, we're going to learn a lot about BK and LSU because if they beat Bama 2 years in a row, I think and I don't want to speak for you, Jackson, but I think we will all shut our mouths and stop doubting BK. What's your take on this game?
Well, I'll be honest, though. Brian Kelly always wins the big regular season games, but he can't quite get it done in the postseason. And yes, he did. Yes, LSU upset Alabama last year, but they were sloppy against Arkansas. They were lucky KJ Jefferson couldn't play in that game. Otherwise, they'd have lost to Arkansas. And that game against Texas A&M, they fell apart in that game. And I mean, what, you're going to brag about beating Purdue? I mean, Purdue lost their head coach. They weren't motivated to play LSU. They wanted to get out of the building as soon as possible. And they lost in the ACC title game. Which, here's the thing, Brian Kelly, again, always loses the big postseason game. So we know he can win a big regular season game. He can win a big postseason game.
Yes. Now, I will say, I want your take on this, Jackson. Does Jalen Daniels scare you at all? Because he is maybe more mobile than the Quentin Ewers and the Joe Miltons and the Carson Becks of the world. Is he the one mobile quarterback that provides the most threat to Alabama because of the fact that he almost has Patrick Mahomes-esque talent? I'm not saying he's Patrick Mahomes. We'll make sure that doesn't get taken out of context. He has Patrick Mahomes-esque talent. He can throw on the run. He can throw the behind the backs. In that way, Jackson, is he the most threat to your Crimson Tide?
Now that you mention it, yeah, that is a little bit scary. So I mean, I don't want to get on the bad side of Jaden Daniels, that's for sure.
Now, he's an interesting story, too, real fast. Arizona State, he was off on, had injuries, had a great season. I believe his junior year, I do believe if I remember, that was 2019 when they beat Oregon and the Justin Herbert year. And then he transfers here to LSU, had a great year last year, took him a minute to learn the new offense. He was part of the overhaul of the Ed Ogeron mess. I'm sorry, LSU fans, you had to go through that. That I understand what that's like as a Louisville fan, especially in college basketball with Rick Pitino. But do you think, looking at it, Jackson, do you think that maybe going through all that adversity that he went through at Arizona State and going through what he went through last year is going to make him even more dangerous, make him even better? And plus, now that he knows what it's like to play Bama, he can now game plan better. What's your take on that?
I could see him playing better than he did last season. I mean, if you look at the stats, he had 28 total touchdowns last season. He had 17 passing touchdowns and 11 rushing touchdowns. I mean, this guy is quick on his feet. You do not want to get on the bad side of Jaden Daniels.
Now, before we give our predictions, I'm going to put you on the spot as an Alabama fan, and I want to know, where do you rank Jalen Daniels in terms of quarterbacks in the SEC specifically? Because me personally, I'm high on the guy, so to speak. I have him in the top 5. I think he's really good. He has the potential to be great if he can get it all together. What do you think, Jackson?
Right now, I got him number 1.
Oh, okay. Wasn't expecting that because there's the Carson Becks of the world.
Him and Joe Milton are the top 2.
I know a lot of Georgia fans are drinking the Kool-Aid as well. Carson Beck's the best quarterback. It's not even a discussion. Well, I think there's a little discussion there. Let's pump the brakes. Jalen Daniels, Joe Milton. If Jalen Milroe can stop the turnovers and Saban can hone that in, he's definitely got the talent to be top 5. Then there's Beck, and then you've got all the other quarterbacks in the SEC. Kind of fold them in where you want, and it's very interesting, I will say. Now, in terms of totality, Jackson, what does this game mean to you as an Alabama fan? When you look at this game, when they put the schedule out and you see, oh, LSU is on the schedule, and especially after what happened last year, what does this game mean to you personally? And what do you think it means to Nick Saban and Alabama?
It means a lot to the Crimson Tide. It means a lot to Nick Saban, and it means a lot to everyone in all of college football.
I agree because let's be honest. This game right here is going to decide who wins the West more than likely. I mean, unless we see maybe a surprise team somewhere, maybe we see Ole Miss could have a breakout year with their fantastic running back duo. But Ole Miss, that's beside the point.
And Ole Miss has added a pretty good transfer at wide receiver in Sakari Franklin from UTSA. So they're going to have a dangerous passing game in the 2023 season.
Which another side plug. Be sure to like, subscribe, comment, and we will be back Saturday for the SEC preview as a whole conference. So for all you Ole Miss fans out there, you're gonna love our prediction for you guys. But back to regularly scheduling program.
You may love mine, but you may not love mine, Ole Miss Nation. So just a fair warning.
But will Alabama and LSU Nation love our predictions for this game, Jackson? What's your prediction for this game?
Well,
who wins Alabama, and why?
I think it's going to be an Alabama 28-24 victory, honestly.
I got Alabama winning 2, but I have Alabama winning 31-14. I feel like Alabama... Yes, I feel like Alabama's gonna put a hurting on them. I feel like Bama is going to make a statement that, hey, LSU, that you're not back. BK is not it. Like, we're still here. I want you to understand that we still run the West around here. I want you to understand. And I think 31-14, I think this is going to be one of Bama's best performances. Now, Week 13, obviously, this is always an important game, whether both teams are under 500 or both teams are fighting for national titles at Auburn, the Iron Bowl, arguably the greatest rivalry ever played. Jackson, what is your take and what is your early thoughts on this game?
Well, I'll be honest, though. I mean, even though we had an easy time with Auburn last year because they were kind of a disaster, and let's be real, it's always an easy win in Tuscaloosa. But at Auburn, it's scary going against them. The last time we've had a double-digit victory in Auburn was in 2015. So that was a 10-point victory. I mean, we lost in 2017 at Auburn. We lost a high-scoring tight game in 2019. We had to go to overtime in 2021. That was the first ever overtime game in the history of the Iron Bowl. 2021 was, but yeah, it's and the fact that Auburn hired Hugh Freeze to be the next head coach basically shows me that they are serious about beating Alabama and Georgia, and they've got some recruiting wins here and there for next season. And I would not be surprised if Auburn does play a little spoiler over Alabama, because I've looked at Saban's record. He's never beaten Auburn 4 straight years. He's beaten them 2 straight years. He's beaten them 3 straight years. But he's never beaten them 4 straight years.
And I also like to point out, when Alabama goes to Auburn, weird things tend to happen. We all remember the kick six, where there was a debate whether or not there should have been extra time. Should they have just ran it out? I'm sure Alabama fans looking back on it, and I'm sure Jackson, you'll speak on this, would have preferred the time just run out and just let's play overtime. But instead, they kicked a long field goal. The kick six. Auburn goes to the SEC title game. It's mayhem, and Alabama misses the championship game, and everyone's happy because Auburn dethroned the big bad Bama. And then, and we also seen in 2019 the Mac Jones pick six at the goal line in Auburn. Mayhem happens when Bama goes to Auburn. I expect the same thing to happen here. I don't know if we'll ever get another kick six. That was pretty special. But, Jackson, what are your predictions for this game? Is Hugh Freeze in his first year going to take down Big Bad Bama?
I don't think this year will be the year Auburn takes down Bama, but I wouldn't be surprised if they did. But with that being said, I'm thinking that's going to be a 38-28 victory for the Alabama Crimson Tide. But I would not. I wouldn't be surprised if Auburn. I wouldn't be surprised if Hugh Freeze pulled a fast one on Saban again.
Now, I will say the one thing working against Auburn is Hugh Freeze is working with a completely new roster. They got to learn a new offense. By week 13, everything should be figured out, and it should all be fine. But weirder things have happened. I mean, look at the NFL, for example, real fast. Look at the Broncos last year. Everyone had the hype. And then Nathaniel Hackett and that offense just could not get going. It was miserable. Like, I'm sorry, Broncos Nation, but they just couldn't get it right. And honestly, Auburn could be the same way. They may not get it right. It may take him a couple years to install his offense. But as far as this game goes, it's at Auburn. If it was again at Alabama, I would say this could be possibly a curb stomp. But I'm going to say this is another rivalry game. I feel like crazy things happen at Auburn. I'm thinking this game's going to end up somewhere like 23-20 Bama. I feel like we could see an overtime, or we could possibly see maybe like another pick six run back for a win. Something along that lines, possibly, just because it is a rivalry and they always play it close. But I think Bama wins. But I would not be surprised, like you said, Jackson, if there is possibly an upset here. Now, with taking all these key games in totality, Jackson, out of the games that we went through, what games are you expecting to be the best game?
Well, I think Tennessee is going to be the best one, honestly.
I would say either Tennessee or Auburn. I think would be the two that I would consider the best games. Now, which game would you consider your sleeper game? The game that we've went over that people may say, "Oh, there's no chance," but it turns out being closer than you think.
Well, I wouldn't go to sleep on the Iron Bowl. That is a no, don't do that. One other game I wouldn't sleep on is Texas A&M because it's like I
Yes,
said, because it was like I said earlier. Um, if they had Max Johnson or Connor Wigman at the helm at starting quarterback for Alabama against Alabama, they would have upset the Crimson Tide in Tuscaloosa, thus knocking out Alabama out of the playoff contention in October. Well, no, they didn't quite. They didn't knock Alabama out at that time, but they probably would have had a hand in doing it.
I I will say this, Jackson. It'll be a fantastic season for sure. I'm looking forward to it because there's so many great games. There's so many things to look forward to, especially for Alabama. Give me, Jackson, your hot take for Alabama this year. Like, if you had one hot take for your Crimson Tide, what is it?
Well, I think they're going to lose in the SEC title game against Georgia. Uh, that's probably my closest to a hot take because I'm looking at the schedule. There's not going to be really a whole lot of surprises, but I do think they lose to Texas A&M, unfortunately.
My hot take is Jalen Milroe finishes top 10 in Heisman voting.
Ooh, that's a good one.
I feel like Saban is going to give him a full season. He's going to learn the new offense. He's going to get it together because Saban, those turnovers drive him nuts. He's like Bill Belichick. He's like a drill sergeant. You turn the ball over, you're going to the bench. And I feel like this year he's fixed that problem. I feel like Milroe's going to finish top 10 in Heisman voting. I feel like he's going to have the numbers because Alabama's running game, it looks a little shaky. I think Bama pass offense is gonna look good, and I think the fact that he's gonna have the running numbers like Caleb Williams, it's gonna help his case. But that's my hot take on that. But the big question is that we need to answer what this is all about, Jackson. Is Alabama still a dynasty? Are they still the team everyone needs to beat after everything that we've talked about tonight and in totality and just looking at history and going forward? Is Alabama still a dynasty? Your take.
I believe that Bama still is a dynasty, but when teams stop storming the field every time they beat Bama, that's when the dynasty is over.
I agree. I think Alabama, as long as Nick Saban is there, they're going to be considered a dynasty, in my opinion. Because, spoiler alert, Jackson, Nick Saban is probably the greatest college football head coach of all time, just in case you didn't know. And just in case for anyone out there, spoiler alert, he's the GOAT, hands down. There's a lot of great coaches, but Saban, what he's done in Alabama, nothing short of spectacular. And I feel sorry for whoever's going to take his job afterwards. They're going to have a heck of a time dealing with that fan base. But as far as the dynasty conversation goes, until teams, like you said, Jackson, stop storming the field and stop bragging about how they beat Bama and how they beat Nick Saban, the dynasty will live on. I know everyone will look at it and say, Alabama, let's just say Alabama doesn't win a championship in the next 5 years, but Saban's still coaching,
Right.
and people say the dynasty's over. Not necessarily, like you said, Jackson. Are teams still storming the field? Are teams still caring about Bama? Are they still circling that game on their calendar? Are they looking at this as their proving point? How good are we? How good can we be? Until people stop doing that, Bama is still dynasty. Like, don't get me wrong, Georgia's now, but Alabama is still the team to beat. Because let's be honest, Georgia, they're going to have plenty of years of success, but can they keep it contained? Contain the success that Alabama has? That's a wait and see. But until people stop circling Alabama on their calendar, then that's the day the dynasty is over. And let's be honest, that as long as Nick Saban's coaching, that day's not coming around anytime soon.
That is not happening this year.
And I will say this on this topic, and Jackson, you could chime in on this if you would like. Do you believe that it is healthy for Alabama and for the landscape of college football that there are now Georgias of the world, that Clemson's have been around, that Oklahoma has been around for a while, that people, even those teams and coaches, even though that they're having their own success, Georgia could three-peat this year, could very well do it. But I'm sure in their mind, they've still got that game against Alabama circled. If they were to play Alabama in the SEC title game or a college football playoff game or a championship, you're telling me Kirby Smart isn't going to be like salivating at the opportunity to beat Nick Saban on the biggest stage again? I mean, am I telling any lies here, Jackson?
No, you're not, my friend. You're telling truth. You're spitting truth, my friend.
I mean, and let's be honest, Jackson, from a fan perspective, Alabama fan perspective and a Louisville perspective, even as Louisville, I look at that and say, Alabama versus, let's say Alabama versus, let's throw Texas since they're on their schedule. I look at that game and say, this is the marquee. This is the game I want to watch. This is the game that has the interest. This is the game that, is Texas really back? Is Texas going to win the Big 12 in their final year? Or Tennessee, for example. It took them 15 years to beat Alabama. Bama. And you're telling me that they're not going to care about it if they beat Alabama 10 straight years in a row? They're going to be throwing a party in Nashville with the Titans. And they're going to have everybody out on the street celebrating because they've done. It's just one of those things that's like, it's like Alabama, until people stop putting them on the marquee and stop storming on the field, they're still a dynasty in my eyes. What do you think on that, Jackson, as we wrap this topic up?
Oh, yeah, they're still a dynasty for right now. It's not going away.
And I will say, yes, Alabama has many flaws this year. There's a lot of things in question, but let's put this in proper context. Nick Saban, look how many players he's put in the NFL. Look at how many he put in the NFL this past year. He had the number 1 overall pick. He had Mac Jones in the top 15. I mean, look at all the great receivers and the defensive players. That also plays a big factor in this because people still want to come to Alabama because they know Nick Saban is going to make them great and he is going to try to win them a natty, make them legendary within the annals of college football history. And until that stops, it's going to be the same story. Now, of course, Nick Saban has had his failures. A.J. McCarron, Jake Croker, is Milroe or Bucher. Those are yet to be determined. Of course, every team has had them. But Alabama has turned out more draft picks and titles and players than a lot of college football teams. And the fact that they go 10-2, 11-1 every year is a great season. I know Alabama fans consider that a disappointment, but I don't. What about you, Jackson? Do you consider that a disappointment as a Bama fan?
I know a lot of Bama fans consider it disappointment, but I remember the days where it sucked to be a Bama fan during the Shula years where we were just happy to have him. So I remember those days because it's like, because I mean, you learn a little more from the bad times than you do from the good times. In the good times, you kind of forget you had bad times. So it's like, I know people both think about Bama having a 10-2 season last season, but let's not forget, we had some pretty disastrous days before we had Nick Saban.
And I want to wrap it up by saying this. To all college football fans and to Alabama fans, I hope you enjoyed the preview. I hope you've enjoyed the content that I'm going to be putting out for you. And I hope you enjoy your season, everybody. I want to put this in totality to put a bow on this conversation. Enjoy it. Enjoy it while it lasts, because Nick Saban's not going to be around forever. No. And when he's gone, he's already GOAT status in a lot of people's eyes, including mine. But we're all going to look back on this, and we're going to appreciate what he did. Because what coach could say they've won 6 natties and won as many SEC titles and turned out as many Heismans as he has? And just to think, and Alabama, and when Nick Saban's gone and you're going possibly 9-3, 8-4, you're going to look back and say, man, I should have enjoyed the Nick Saban era while I had it. That 10-2 season and a Sugar Bowl win is looking really nice right about now. So just to all fans that are spoiled with that, y'all are great fans. That's what makes college football what it is. But enjoy it. You just don't know what tomorrow brings. You don't know what the next season's going to bring. Just enjoy it and have fun. Let's watch these football games this year. Whether you're a Bama fan, Georgia, Ole Miss, Kentucky, heck, even if you're a Chattanooga fan, enjoy it, love it. And this is what college football is all about. And you're going to look back and say, wow, I witnessed the greatest dynasty in history. That's Alabama football. But with all that being said, I think it's time to wrap up the show. I appreciate everyone being here. I appreciate everyone watching. Please make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. And Jackson, would you like to promote yourself before we go?
Next week, next Wednesday, I have an episode with Sidelines Arizona for a Jack Shonin episode for episode number 9, right here on YouTube and on Twitter. And yep, there's my little link. You can check me out on YouTube. Check me out on Twitter. See whatever kind of takes I have, or see what I'm rambling about. So it can happen on Twitter. It's pretty fun. Or as we call it, X.com. And you can also check me out on Instagram, where I also post some predictions and post some of the stories and post some takes here and there. And you can also check me out on Bread.net. Same as Instagram. It's the same account. And it's pretty fun. So check me out on all those platforms.
Jackson, I appreciate you being here. I hope you
Thank you for
enjoyed the
having me on.
great time for the 2023 Alabama preview. It should definitely be very interesting. But ladies and gentlemen, I bid you a good night and a ta-da for now. But remember, I'll be back tomorrow night for a West Virginia football preview with Joey Foster. And then Saturday night, we're diving into some conference with the man next to me. Jackson Johnson will be joining me again as we preview the SEC. Please like, subscribe, comment. Helps the channel and the algorithm out. We're out, baby. See you soon.
See you soon. It's an honor hanging with the